So, there'll be electric car in a lot of people's future. Those are all electric cars. For what we're going to cover in this presentation, we're going to talk about a little of the recent history, how we got where we are. We're going to talk about Tesla's secret plan, something called forcing functions, why people buy electric cars, cost breakdown. We're going to look at cost comparisons between electric cars and regular cars, and we're going to address range anxiety. We're going to touch on battery longevity. We're going to compare a gas car to hybrid cars to full EVs. We're going to talk about the tailpipe argument. That's moving the pollution from the tailpipe of the car to the power station. And we're going to take a little look into the future. We'll start on recent history. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about EV1. This whole thing started when GM acquired Hughes Aircraft. Hughes Aircraft had a solar car department that they were working on solar cars. And when GM acquired Hughes Aircraft, they said, what are we going to do with this group? So they said, why, just keep doing what you're doing. And they built this car called Sunny Racer. They entered it in a solar car competition down in Australia, and it won first place. Then the group came up with this concept car. A concept car is something that the engineers play with, and they were going to do in the future, maybe, maybe not, they don't really care. And they said, well, when we do this, it will have a 120-mile range and it costs $30,000. And that wasn't something they could do at that time. It was something that they were projecting for the future. How did I get there? Well, it just so happens that air pollution is a problem. And California looked at this electric car and said, oh my gosh, this is a solution to our problems. GM, you will do it. In fact, we'll make all the manufacturers do it. See, because when we look at this list here of the 10 worst polluted cities in the United States, considering Modesto, 6 of the top 11 are in California. And that's because they have air inversion like we have here in St. Louis. And just to put it in perspective, New York City is number 17, and the city you all know and love is 25, 25th on the list, thanks to our inversion. So, California announced their ZEB program, zero emission vehicles. And they said, okay, and there was electric cars and hybrids. And actually, this was why what? It'll come to me after the meeting. But when GM knew that they were going to have to produce these cars, they purchased the right to the EV95 nickel metal hydride batteries that was owned by Panasonic before. And it's very much like as the nickel iron batteries that Thomas Edison had made. Just a close cousin. So when GM delivered their first EV1, it had lead acid batteries because the nickel metal hydrides weren't ready to go yet. And if you look, it just looked like, incidentally, the name of that car was the Impact, which is probably an unfortunate name for an automobile. See, even had the same hubcaps. But see, it's a two-seater. So, and in 1999, they upgraded it to the nickel metal hydride batteries. And then GM decided that the battery technology for the nickel metal hydrides really wasn't ready. What does that mean? That means they couldn't find a way to make money with it. Because GM has a fiduciary responsibility to produce money for its shareholders. So what GM did is they sold the licensing rights to Texaco. Guess what Texaco did? They told the people that had the licensing rights that they weren't for sale anymore, and they had to they weren't going to honor that anymore. Let their licensing of the batteries. So that's what killed all those cars. Well, that called them in, and there was a public outcry when they brought all the cars in. They ended the program, and this was, see, these are EV1s out here, and they held a funeral for the car because the people that had them loved those cars. And this is those cars when they crushed them. This is in Arizona. So if we would take a look and do a post-mortem on EV1, it was a $20,000 two-seater. That's what the car would have been worth. And it was selling for $30,000, had a range of 120 miles, and would run 80 miles an hour. But if we look at this report card, the science, it wasn't as good as a gas car. The cost was as more than a gas car. Special interest appeared to have good public support. But part of the thing with the cost was GM couldn't make money at $30,000. So that was kind of a non-starter. So the cost was more. See, that was the cost, and then it was even more. And then the support, the state of California says, yes, we support this whole thing, but please don't think that the manufacturers supported it. So there was pretty much a conflict of interest between the two of them. And the opinion was positive for the people that drove it. For the rest of the country, it was very much negative. So it pretty much failed on every count. So what killed the car is the technology simply just wasn't ready. And GM was right about that. Buzz, it's the batteries. It's all about the batteries.
I think it was the oil company that had a big influence in keeping them out.
The batteries weren't ready. You simply couldn't do it. So if we look at, there was more than just EV1. See, GM produced this one, and this was Toyota, and the Alta was from Nissan, and Ford had their Ranger. And the EV1 came out with lead-acid batteries, and the Ranger came out with lead-acid batteries. But the Japanese cars came out with Japanese batteries. Yeah, okay. And so the batteries were updated. But if we look at what's the status of these, there's one EV1 still exists, and it's non-functional, and it's on display in the museum. The RAV4s, they were crushed. These cars were all crushed in 2003, except in 2014. And there's a few RAV4s available. You can find them on eBay, or a few Rangers. The RAV4s have nickel metal hydride batteries, and the Rangers mostly have lead acid. So, Larry Page came out with a movie called Who Killed the Electric Car? And they really made GM the boogeyman in all of this. And GM really felt bad about this. And Bob Lutz, right in 2006, right after that, Tesla came out with their Roadster. It was at the California International Auto Show. And like I said, Bob Lutz said, these guys aren't even car guys, and if they can do it, we can do it. So they talked GM into building an electric car, and they came out with a concept car for the Chevy Volt, which, as you can clearly see, is what they use for the Camaro. But the reason that they were going to do a sports car is because electric cars have instant acceleration, and they feel sporty and they're quiet and they're fun to drive, so it made sense as a sports car, and they thought it would be a two-seater. But the suits decided, that was what the engineers decided. The suits decided that that wasn't be what they would do, and this is what they introduced. This is the Chevy Cruze with an electric drivetrain in it. And Nissan Leaf came out with theirs. Nissan came out with theirs, and BMW came out with the i3. What most of you don't know is they also came out with the i8. And that is about the wildest car. There's a couple of these in St. Louis. And this is a wild vehicle, and this shows that BMW understood what an electric car was. Because everybody's making compact cars, compact economy cars, because they think, well, how the hell else can you sell a golf cart? But BMW understood that it was the heart of a sports car, and no sports cars in the future were going to be able to compete with electric cars unless they were electric themselves. And BMW understood that in, this came out early 2011. So, let's talk about Tesla's secret plan. They actually made this public, but if you would talk to any of the people, editors of newspapers and people reporting on the electric cars, obviously none of them knew anything about this because they never said squat about it. So, Tesla's secret plan, they come out in 2006, and their mission was to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy and to build an affordable electric car for the common man. So, that was impossible, if impractical at the time, because GM just proved it couldn't be done, and the other manufacturers all agreed. So you have to understand the technology adoption cycle. This is it. You have innovators buy the first vehicles and they pay too much for it, and the early adopters pay dearly for it, and then the early majority pay maybe a fair price, and then it becomes competitive in the market, and then the price goes down, down, down. An example of the technology adoption cycle was the cell phones. Originally, they weighed 10 pounds, they cost $4,000, and all they did was you can make calls on them. Look at what they do today. This was the 10-pound brick. This is what I have in my pocket. So what we need to do is Tesla committed to forcing this cycle. And they had to find a way in order to accomplish it, because we're here right now. And when we look at the car for the common man, at best, it's right here. So how do we get from where we are to where we want it to go? Well, this is the technology adoption S-curve, and that's a distribution of the people involved in each one. And you start with innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards, and that's how they fit in the curve distribution-wise. And what you find out is the innovators are a different kind of people. So if you want to appeal, if those are going to buy your early products, you need to appeal to that group. So you need to have a product that appeals to that group. And the early adopters are a slightly different group of people, and you need to create a product for that group. So, and there's this little problem with, remember what we said? It's the batteries, stupid. Well, the batteries were $600 a kilowatt hour, and they need to be at $100 a kilowatt hour in order to make this work. For GM to make money, this is what it has to be. So, what do? What's the plan? We have to wait on battery development. That's GM's plan. What's Elon's plan? So, looking at this plan again, we have to remember who the innovators are. They're young, they're risk takers. They look at new technologies, and if it fails, it fails, but that's who they are. And the early adopters are a little more practical, they're a little older, but these are people that high education, good finances. So, what do? Well, here's a business plan. So you start, and here is the high-price, low-volume car for the really rich. And that's the first section. And then the mid-price car, medium volume for the next one. And then the low-price, high-volume car for the masses. Okay, this is the low-volume car for the masses. So what's the plan? Toy for the rich, a luxury car, a toy for the super-rich, a luxury car for the rich, and a car for the common man. So this is the Roadster. It was $110,000. This was the Model S, and it originally came out at $70,000. And here's the Model 3. So that was their plan. So the idea is make it affordable, make it desirable. Oops, and that won't work. You got to make it practical too. So that's what they had to do. And their business plan, as an entrepreneur is someone who jumps out of an airplane and builds his parachute on the way down. So if you would like a visual of the Tesla business plan, this is it. And Elon said that they weren't going to bet the company again now that they've got to Model 3 position. And I think that he might be pushed back in that position again. So, but we have to understand how this works. If we look at this gray line here, that's the cost of batteries. That's what GM is paying for batteries and everybody else is paying for batteries. But Tesla, their batteries are this red line. See, this was $1,000 a kilowatt hour, and it comes down here to finally in 2025 it's $100 a kilowatt hour. Where Tesla is $100 a kilowatt hour at the end of the year. Now, when we understand that, then we have to look at these other two lines. This blue dotted line across the bottom that's for the Tesla Model 3. That's an affordable electric car, the Model 3. And for an economy car, that's the blue line at the bottom. The green line at the bottom. Now, the Tesla Model, there would have been a line here for a full-size luxury car. But the different cars have different markups, different prices, the way they are. And for electric cars, this is how it would fit, so an electric car can compete nose to nose with a gas car. And this is the chart that you have to work to. And this is the chart when GM says it can't be done because we got to make money and we can't make money. So we will come back to this chart because this chart is what is driving electric car adoption. And if we take a look, we can see these are electric car sales in the United States, and the Tesla, the S and the X lead it, and the Volt. And then there's the Prius Prime. So this is 2006, anyhow. And there's the i8 down there. So there were 48 in the United States. And this is the amount of cars that they make, and they start out. This is the Model S. The Model S is blue, the Model X is in gray, and the Model 3 is in red. And as you can see, they've pretty much, bringing out the Model X was a problem, but anyhow, that they have grown continuously. This is manufacturing capacity. And what we're looking at is the bars that we have on the left-hand side. The leftmost part of the bar is what production was in 2017, and the right side of that same bar is how much it will grow between 2017 and 2020. And in the United States, Tesla has their batteries with Panasonic, and the new Gigafactory 3, they'll be Cadel. And then over here is the battery cost, and you see how as the density energy goes up, the price of the battery is coming down. So this is part of what's happening in that technology adoption cycle. Because you put a bunch of smart people somewhere where you give them a way to make money, and it's amazing what you can get out of them. And this is car companies by battery sales. And you can see that Tesla's leading the group there. The Model Y is something that's coming out. It's something my wife and I have had our eye on. For one thing, it's higher than a 3, and it's easier for old people to get in and out of. And I'm the old person in the family, and my wife is doing it for consideration of me, I'm sure. But they came out and they announced 4 different models, and these are the specs for those 4 models. Okay, forcing functions. What is forcing people? And I repeat, what is forcing people to buy electric cars? Well, the same thing that we're forcing them not to buy electric cars, is just that those factors are going from bad to good. And pollution, cost, the driving experience, and the fact that it's bigger, better, faster, it's just a better car.
Left off laws.
Huh?
Left off state laws. California would be a forcing factor.
The government has tried to force us all to buy economy cars, and that has not worked because everybody's driving pickup trucks and SUVs. So we can say that the American public has said to the government laws. So when we look at those factors, let's look at pollution. This is global pollution. If we look at the bars over here on the far right, that's the United States. And that's about the average over there for those. And Europe is next, and you see their pollution is about twice as bad, and China is about 4 times as bad, and India is about 6 times as bad. So if pollution is something that forces you to get electric cars, you find we're not forced to do it in the United States, but they certainly are in China and India. China's a little better financially equipped to do something about it than India. So that's one forcing factor. And if you go to those countries, you'll find out they have more electric cars than we do. We do not lead the world in this. The countries that are being forced to buy the electric cars by the forcing factors are the ones where the cars are. Looking at China, well, you'll be glad you don't live in China. What they find out is it's estimated that air pollution is responsible for 4,400 deaths every day, and no telling how many health problems. Now, we're in denial in the United States because that's about our number of people we accredited to pollution deaths a year.
Are we in denial, or is it just that we have less pollution?
No, we have less pollution, but we're in denial of the deaths because it's not us. And the dead people don't complain that much. So we look, and electric cars sales in China, they sell more electric cars than they do anywhere else. The United States is here because they're a really big country, and we're a lot bigger than France, and we're certainly bigger than Norway. Norway's a tiny country. You know, Missouri's bigger than Norway. And now, Norway's on the list. I'll show you why Norway's on the list.
Norm, on that previous slide with the number of cars per country, they have any kind of breakdown of a percentage of cars sold?
Oh, right now in Norway, about half the cars sold are being electric. So when we look at the cost is divided into three areas: the purchase price, the operating cost, and the maintenance cost. And right now, the purchase price is more for most electric cars. The operating cost is mainly gasoline, and we look at, that's the United States, and these numbers they change all the time, but the ratios are about the same. And what we find out is we have the cheapest gas in the civilized world, because this is Mexico and Russia and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. And I guess if you want to live in any of those places. But this is the rest of the world, and the rest of the world has more expensive gas. And look what this one here is. Norway. Norway, they have the most expensive gas in the world. And that's why they have a high electric car adoption rate.
How much of that is caused by taxation as opposed to the actual cost of the gas?
It's the price of the gas that's the problem, and the price is taxation more than anything else.
Okay.
So the operating cost is about actually a third of what it is for a gas car. It costs me about 3 cents a mile. And the maintenance cost is about a half. And the purchase price is going to be less down the road from now. And I have a time frame for that, by the way. When we look at the driving experience, this is really interesting, because people love driving electric cars. And why is that? Because they have instant acceleration. They're perfectly quiet. You can drive the car with one pedal. You let off the accelerator, and regen slows the car down. So you only have to use the brake for emergency stops and to actually stop at stop signs. It's much more responsive. You have better stopping. It's really a strange sensation when we hit the brakes in our car, because in a regular car, when you hit the brakes, it's like this. In my car, when you hit the brakes, it's like this. Because the car actually sits down instead of stands on its nose. And the heat and air condition is electronic instead of mechanical through the motor and anyhow, so it's almost instant. And you have computerized traction control. One of the most amazing things I've ever heard or seen about electric cars is a Tesla is capable of going to 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. They did it in the rain in 2.9 because they don't let the tire slip. It slips less than a half a revolution, and they go.
Okay. Now, like you said, the Tesla would be, if I was to buy an electric car today, the only car I would consider would be buying a Tesla. Everything else, it seems like they're compact, they're still underpowered, and there's no luxury.
There's an end to that, I promise you.
Right, and I hope that happens before.
I have that schedule for that.
Before they force us out of the gasoline cars, because I refuse to drive in one of those. I absolutely refuse to drive in a compact vehicle that has no luxury and no power. I need at least a car that can go up to 135 miles an hour. I know I will never go that fast, but it's nice to have that acceleration.
Okay. So the driving experience of an electric car is much better than a regular car. And when we look at this next factor here, if we compare Tesla to the average full-size luxury sedan, what you have is, if you went to Consumer Reports, these would be all the categories that you would be comparing against: acceleration, handling, ride, seating capacity, interior space, fuel economy, maintenance cost, safety, popularity, resale value. So how does Tesla compare in each of these areas? Well, the price is comparable, because they're a $70,000 to $100,000 luxury car competing against other $70,000 to $100,000 luxury cars. You know, people say, well, Teslas cost too much. They don't actually cost too much. They might be out of your price category, but they cost the same as other cars that they comparable to them. In acceleration, they're first. Their sedan is faster than a Bugatti.
I have a customer that has one, and I rode in his sedan.
Uh-huh.
It'll scare the living hell out of you. The performance is
Uh-huh.
unbelievable. And that's a sedan.
Because the battery is built, is real low. The handling it's on a par with the best sports cars. The ride is practically the same as a Rolls Royce. The seating capacity is 5+2, which is a lot for a sedan. Interior space is comparable to most SUVs because what is above the battery is space. And the fuel economy is, it's twice that of a Prius. The maintenance cost is about half that of a VW Jedi. It has the highest safety rating in the world at this point. It is the most popular luxury car in the world, even in Germany. And it has the highest resale value of any car. So, where do you think Tesla rates compared to these other cars based on this chart? I don't think there's any doubt. And it's not a Tesla isn't the best car in the world because, it's the best car in the world because it's an electric car. This is why. This is called the skateboard design, and the batteries are underneath here, and the motor's back here, and the dual motor, there's one in the front. But Hans says everything above the battery is opportunity space. So the front, they have a great crumple zone. So when we look at acceleration, it's because it's an electric motor, because electric motors have their highest torque at 0 RPM. Handling is because the weight is all down here. Safety is because we have the crumple zone and we have more options for the engineers to do a good job on it. Everything that was on that category that made the Tesla #1 is because it's an electric car, and the other car manufacturers are figuring this out, especially Audi, BMW, and Mercedes, because that's mainly where the sales have come from for Teslas. So they're all on board, while all our local manufacturers are still in denial. When we look at a Chevy Volt, you see the cars look very different. And the reason they look very different is because the Tesla was built from the ground up as an electric car, and the Chevy Volt was built from the ground up as a multi-platform car. In other words, it's a gas car, it's a hybrid, or it's an electric. In fact, the Chevy Volt is built on the same line as the Chevrolet Sonic. And you just if you're building a Sonic, you take the parts off over here, and you're building a Bolt, you take the parts over there, and when it gets down further, they're the same parts. So it's a ground-up design and a multi-platform design. So this cost is a problem. So let's look at the cost breakdown and see exactly where that is. 40% of the cost is for batteries, 14% electronics, the interior is about 11%, suspension's 11%, high voltage motor is 6%, exterior is 8%, and the chassis is 7%. This came from Teslanomics, and Dan Summons, here's a picture of him. And he's a data geek, and he's put a lot of good stuff together. So we're going to have to do something. So something's got to happen with batteries in order for the cost, so you can see on that chart that batteries is where the cost is, and that's what has to come down. When we look at cost comparisons, if we look at the Tesla Model S, just 249 and 315, that's the mileage depending on what model you've got. But the lowest model is $76,000, and it is comparable to BMW Model 5, which incidentally also costs $76,000. So you're paying a premium of no premium. Likewise, if you go to the Model 3, it's comparable to BMW Series 3, and it's a $35,000 car competing against other $35,000 cars, so you're not paying a premium when you buy a Tesla Model 3. If you buy a Chevy Volt, it's a $36,000 car. It's a very nice Sonic. That nice Sonic would cost about $20,000, so you're paying $16,000 extra because it's electric. It's worth more because it's electric, but most people will not buy the $16,000 price tag. I will tell you this, everybody that has a Chevy Volt loves it and they have no regrets. Here's my car, the Chevy Volt. I have a Gen 1, this is a Gen 2. They're a $33,000 car. It's comparable to an $18,000 Cruise, so you pay $15,000 because it's electric. A BMW i3 is a $45,000 car. It's comparable to their X1, which is $34,000, so you're paying $11,000 extra. And a Nissan Leaf, this is the new Leaf, and it's a $30,000 car, and it's a very nice Versa. So, and you pay $16,000. The Versa would be a $16,000 car, so it's $14,000 extra. So, one reason that the Teslas are outselling these other cars is because they're competing price-wise and nobody else is. And this is the reason. Because here's the Tesla Model 3, the price gap in the battery is this big, where we go to the Chevy Volt, and it is designed as a compact economy car, and it's got the GM cost for batteries, and that gap is much bigger. And that's why the other manufacturers cannot compete price-wise with Tesla at this time. Plus, they announced a lower price for the Tesla too. So, when we look at range anxiety, if we go to this chart right here, the red line, the bottom shows how many miles your average trip is. You know, you make a trip, and this is what percentage of them. And most of your trips are short. And you get up around 35, 36 miles with what the Chevy Volt was designed on this chart, by the way. And it shows that handles 90% of your trips, and it's hard to justify paying for batteries that you almost never use. So that was the design concept for the Volt. But what it turns out is there really aren't very many times that you need a car that runs, because this is your vacation or something, generally. That's where the Chevy Volt is, that's the Volt 1, and the Nissan Leaf is off the chart. So,
when I'm driving to visit my parents in Ohio, I know I got to stop off in Indianapolis to get gas along the way. How long, no, that's not the question. How long does it take to charge it back up? Because I can refill my tank in about 3 minutes. How long would it take when I'm in Indianapolis to recharge?
Well, what you do is you stop at one of their supercharger stations that also has a restaurant or something there, and you stop in, and you're going to have to leave before you're done eating because your car will be charged. So typically, the supercharger stations are typically 150 miles apart. And you do not charge your battery all the way up, because the further it charges, the slower it charges. So you only charge enough to give you a safety range to get to the next supercharger or your destination. And it charges much faster there. And this is where the supercharger stations are, looking at it nationwide, and this is looking at it close. Here's in St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago, Memphis, and Louisville. So there's lots of charging stations all around. And to give you an idea what's going on this chart, the orange ones are Tesla stations, and the green ones are everybody else. And the Teslas are supercharger stations, and the green ones are charged at level 2, which is overnight for several hours. You know, so you can recharge in 20 to 30 minutes with the orange stations. and everybody else you're charging 2 to 6 hours.
Okay, so instead of 3 or 4 minutes to recharge, it would be 20 to 30 minutes to charge it up.
If you're in a Tesla, if you're in something else. But see, all the other groups and manufacturers and the government has made the green stations, and Tesla by theirself has made the orange stations.
Long question. To your left. Harry.
I know Ameren charges a lower electric rate if you have an electric car with that tax thing or whatever we pay on our bills.
Yeah, and they help you buy solar cells for your house too. Okay.
Question. All right, now, okay, here's the problem with batteries. We still rely on the lithium. Was it?
I will get there. Hold it.
Yeah, they don't.
So, what you're asking about is battery longevity. And you think because you have lithium-ion batteries in your phone that the lithium-ion batteries in the car are just like it. And they're nothing like it because they're designed totally different. Because the battery in your phone, they want it to be really small and they only care it lasts 2 years because they're going to make you buy a new phone anyhow. And that doesn't work with cars. Tell somebody you got to buy a new car. And what this is this is Ben Sullen's chart, the Data Geek, the guy I showed you the picture of before. And he has collected all this data, and these are all cars and mileage. And what we find out is he has a better chart than this. He has a better study, but I don't have the better chart. So what happens is when you buy the car, it has 100% capacity in the battery. And then after you use it for a while, it gets years old and cycle charges on it. At 50,000 miles, you're down to 95%. And you say, this is bad, I don't like where it's going. But you do like where it's going because you get all the way, see, that's 95%. But you're still at 93% at 200,000 miles. So the truth is, we don't know how long the batteries will last. What it looks like is they're probably good for 400,000 miles and they'll last the life of the car. That's a Tesla. If we go to a Chevy Volt, we have a Chevy Volt. This is Eric Belmer's 2012 Chevy Volt with 450,000 miles on it. And this comes off of Voltec. When you have OnStar in your Volt, or on your Chevy car, in the Volt it reports in and tells everything. So this tells you, this is the total miles he's driven, and this is how many miles that were driven on. He drives 110 miles one way every day. Well, he used to. He's got another job. And right here is when he ran over a car from a semi on the highway, and his car was in repair. So that's a pretty steady rate, and you can see that the range of the battery seems to be good for 450,000 miles, and his car has started to have trouble now, but we don't know what the problem is. But anyhow, we know that it went to 450,000 miles. So battery longevity, because they're built with very different criteria for the automobiles and for than they are for your cell phones. Huh?
They said the cost of ownership is a lot less because I know Ford's bringing out electric trucks now.
That's what I can't.
That's what my friend mechanic told me.
I have that covered too.
No, okay, a few things. With the battery, it still takes, like you said, 30 minutes to charge or more. It could take or I'm not sure where we are, but it's like I'd like to pull in the gas station and I like to put the pump in.
I don't believe you.
A minute or two.
I don't believe you. No, I don't believe you like to pull in a gas station. You would rather have an electric car and have it charge at home and never do anything. Just drive it.
But I'd like to have
If you had an electric car, all you would have to do is drive it. You wouldn't have to go to the gas station.
No. I'm saying what I'm saying. No, I agree. I'd like to have an electric car, but I'd like to charge it at the same rate that I charge, put gas in my car, with about a minute or two.
I don't think so. The people who have the electric cars do not find that to be a problem. You're seeing a problem that people that have the cars do not see.
Wireless charging would be another.
Be-
I'd like to
You don't have to do that either if you don't want. You do know you can charge your cell phone wirelessly. You can also charge your electric car wirelessly if you get that kind of charging system. In fact, one of the things they're thinking of doing is putting the charging in the road so you can charge your car while you're driving. So, what I'd like to do is compare a gas car to a hybrid car to a full electric car. So, here's a car, and we find out that you have considerable engine losses because internal combustion engine is only like 20 to 22% efficient. So, and this shows the breakdown of where the losses go in each case. When we go to parasitic losses like the water pump and the alternator, you lose another 4 to 6%. And this part of the wheels is actually where the Nissan, the Toyota Prius excels, because its design is to cut down on wind resistance. It has low rolling resistance tires, and it has regenerative braking to cut off those losses. And then idling losses is 3%, and drivetrain losses another 5 to 6%. So currently they're saying that if we use gas as the standard, and we called it 100%, and they're saying that the mileage of the average car right now is 25 miles per gallon, and that is not talking about SUVs or trucks. But anyhow, that's what they're saying is a typical car now. If that was a hybrid, you would find out that this loss is less because you're not running the gas motor all the time. And you'd find out your parasitic losses are at the low end. You'd find that Prius, this is what the Prius does. It cuts that 25% down to 10%, and it's a small economy car. And the idling losses are like 1%, and the drivetrain losses are like 5%. So for a hybrid, it only uses 60%, and it gets 50 miles to the gallon. Priuses do better, everybody else does worse. When we look at an electric car, we go up to engine losses. An electric engine is over 90% efficient. And parasitic losses, these things are electronic instead of mechanical, so the number is a little lower than even the Prius. We have a hard time beating the Prius in wind resistance, rolling resistance, and regenerative braking. Our 1% idling loss is actually lower 1% than the Prius 1%. And the drivetrain losses are about 1% because they're any drivetrain. You got a motor, you have straight cut gears, you got the rear wheels. That's it. So what you're looking at is only about 25% of the energy used to do that, to drive the vehicle. So 100 miles per gallon is pretty typical and not a hard number to get for an electric car. Now we're going to the tailpipe argument and moving the pollution from the car to the power station. Most people don't realize that's a good thing. The energy use, like we said, is only 1/4. So you have less pollution to deal with to start off with, off the top. And when they said that you made more pollution, at one time in history that argument might have been true, but the day they made the argument it was already not true anywhere, even in West Virginia. And when I said moving the exhaust from the tailpipe to the power station, if you live in Los Angeles, you would see the wisdom of that. And you would realize that our Chevy Volt has a mode called hold. So if I lived out of town and I'm going into the city that has a no emission law, that I could push my hold button and drive on gas till I got to the city and then drive on electric in the city, and then drive on gas back home again. But there are already 240 cities in the world with no exhaust emission zones in the cities. So, in the power plant, when we move the pollution to the power plant, the pollution standards for the power plant are stricter than for your car. Because there's more of us than we vote, so that's how it works. And wind and solar and other renewable energies are growing at about 35% a year. So if you buy an electric car today, the longer you own it, the cleaner it'll get. And the battery storage, when they put battery storage to back up the grid, they will get rid of the peaker plants, and that will help even more.
I've got something. I'm gonna stump you here. You were saying, you know, the electric car, you're used to not having the battery charged right away. Well, here's the stumper. I pull in the garage, the car is near empty, and now it's charging, but I've got to leave 15 minutes later, and I've got to have a full battery before then. I have to go a few hundred miles. I'm just using this as a hypothetical. All right, now you're stumped.
No, I'm not stumped.
You just told me.
Because what happens is you have 300 miles of range, and I can't hold it for 300 miles. So I have to stop. See, what happens is you have bladder anxiety, and bladder anxiety trumps range anxiety any time.
Good answer.
Gas stations have those.
Julie, do you know anybody that owns an electric car?
What?
Do you have any friends that have an electric car?
I don't know anyone personally.
Well, if you would talk with them, you would find out that they don't have a problem dealing with the problems that you have a problem dealing with, because you see the problem is bigger than they think it is.
You're leaving on the battery's almost dead. I mean, drained, not.
Now, wait a minute. You left in the morning with a full 300-mile range.
No.
Now you're coming home and you want to leave 15 minutes later? I'm not buying it.
Julie, if you had any friends that had an electric car, you wouldn't be asking any of these questions.
Okay. And I'm going to show you where you are on the adoption curve, okay? So that might help. So, special interest opposition. So the problem with special interest opposition is we have people that say electric cars is good and we would like our kids and grandkids to have a world where they could breathe. But there are people who if you're in West Virginia, you want to have coal mines because that's where your job is. And people have a tendency to be blind when their finances are the issue. And the automakers, they don't want to change. They're happy doing what they're doing because they're making money. And they certainly don't want Tesla selling cars that they could be selling. And that is why half the states in the United States, it's illegal to sell a Tesla in that state. You've got to buy it from another state and get it delivered. And the automobile dealers, they make most of their money on maintenance, not on selling the car. And Eric Belmer has put in 2 sets of wheel bearings. He had one accident when he hit a tire, and at 450,000 miles, he's now starting to have some issues with the car. So there isn't any maintenance that's evolved. It's rotating the tires and putting in that pesky washer fluid that takes and is the bitch with electric cars. That's what wears you out. And hedge fund money managers. Did you hear this thing where the SEC said Elon Musk can't Twitter anymore and tell people the truth? What happens is Tesla is the most shorted stock on the stock exchange by almost a factor of 2. And there are people that can make huge, huge money if Tesla goes broke. And I have noticed what happens is Tesla gets to an important point inflection point in their development, in their business cycle, and all of a sudden this news comes out. Now, this is not new news. This is news that has already been tested. But basically, in most cases, their lies are something that no longer is applicable. But they test the lie first to see how the people are going to respond. And then when they want to move to market, they tell the lies again. Even though it's been proved that they're lies, it doesn't change anything.
Why has Tesla had to close some of their dealerships, but there's still a backlog for people getting the cars? It kind of goes along with what you're saying.
They're trying to,
They're giving
they
them a hard time.
they have, remember the guy? Their idea is that they're going to accomplish all these things and they're going to be able to force the technology and single-handedly make electric cars viable while everybody's opposing them. And to do everything on schedule is difficult. So they are actually, the problem that they had is you find that it's hard to buy a $35,000 Model 3 because Tesla is having trouble making money on the $35,000 Model 3. So they have to sell it with $4,000 autopilot or a $6,000 additional battery pack or the luxury interior to move the price up so that they have enough margins that they can make their profit on the car.
I know some of the higher dollar ones are given lifetime warranty to the original purchaser. And if they buy the ones around 100,000.
So the SEC is just another bought and paid for organization because when Elon said they had funding secured, then all the rigmarole came up and Elon went out to all the stockholders and said, what do you say? And the consensus for the stockholder is they did not want it to go private. And that is the reason they didn't go private, not because they didn't have the people who wanted to fund it. Because the people in Saudi Arabia have the money. Let me tell you this, you'll never guess what country in the world has the largest solar array in the world. Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Do you know why? Because they make their money from selling oil and gas. And as their country becomes more profitable, they're using more of it themselves. In fact, they reached a point where they were using 25% of their own production. So Saudi Arabia says, no, I don't like that model. We want to keep, our livelihood depends on selling oil and gas, not taking care of our own people. So we'll install solar panels and take care of our people with solar panels and let everybody else buy oil and gas. And the way they were able to take and come at a price point that nobody else can touch is because worldwide, half the cost of installing solar is what we call soft cost. In the United States, it's 1/3. It's not a half, it's 1/3. And those are like getting all your permits and things and getting the Sierra Club to agree that these solar panels aren't going to affect the birds and the lizards and the tortoises. You know, and buying the land and going through all that. If you go to a place like Gila Bend in Arizona, where they have decommissioned a couple coal power plants, they're just using those same areas in the same grid and installing solar systems. And they go to the solar company and say, we already have all your permitting and everything already done. We've got the land, we've got all this done. All you got to do is build the damn thing. That cuts off half of the cost, and those people have jobs back. And the pollution is a lot less from them solar panels than it is from the coal plants, so they don't have a problem passing it locally. The mainstream media. The mainstream media, it's irresponsible to me of most of the reporting that they've done, and it's irresponsible that they don't know what they're saying isn't the truth. Because it's easier to say, the sky is falling, and sell a newspaper and say, everything's fine here. I'm sorry, I have no bad news to report. And the problem with government is they're divided. You know, we can look in Texas. You can't buy a Tesla in Texas. It's illegal to buy a Tesla in Texas. Why would that be? Because the auto dealers paid off the politicians. So the government is people, and anyhow, it's just like the backdrop on my chart. So that's a special interest. So Julie, this is your slide. And we're looking at, this is the adoption curve. Okay, and this is innovators. And these are young, upward, pretty well-to-do people that are risk takers. And they're problem solvers. And these are early adopters. And these are the early majority, these are the late majority, and these are the laggards. Now let's look like the early adopters. The early adopter people that had Teslas, Liz, one of the early Tesla owners here in St. Louis, drove across the country before the supercharger network was even there. She's a manager and she knows how to manage, and it's just a problem and she manages problems. And what she would do is she would go to campgrounds where they have RVs and where they plug in with the level 2 chargers, and she would call them and say, hey, I would like to stop at your campground and charge. And he says, we don't have that facility. She says, yes, you do. I just want to park in one of your RV spots. How much? And if she didn't like the rate, she'd call another campground. And she traveled all over the country.
Speaking of the adoption curve, I've seen a few Teslas in my subdivision. It's a middle upper class neighborhood, and I've seen a few of them driving around. It's like people, I guess I'm starting to see more and more of them here on the road locally.
Okay, but
Area.
what happens is people down here on the chart look at this and say, this is an opportunity. What can I do to make this opportunity work for me? And those are early adopters, and those people are down here. These people up here say, I'm not going to do squat. You have to solve all my problems. Until you do, I'm not going to buy your piece of crap. So those are the laggards and the late adopters, and these are the early adopters. And it just depends on what somebody is willing to do and work with in order to make it work for them. So when we look at this chart, it'd be interesting. It'd be nice if we had some dates on the bottom. So this is the Roadster. These are the early adopters, and the innovators. The early adopters were the S and the X, and the majority is the Model 3 and the Y, and all the others that are coming. And let's put the years across the bottom of the chart. And that we can see is that we've begun the cycle right here. And what we're going to find is this red line. The red line is when electric cars cost more than gas cars. The black line is when electric cars and gas cars cost about the same. And right now that's true for Teslas, for the Model 3 pretty much, and it's going to be true for the cars that are coming. And starting about 2024, 25, electric cars will be cheaper. Electric cars will be cheaper. Then there'll be no reason to buy a gas car except that you're stubborn and you like the noise and the pollution. So these are some cars that are coming. And when I say coming, there's been hundreds of electric cars announced and things, and most of it was just hot air. Because you can't build an electric car if you don't have a supply of batteries. If you don't have some place to get the batteries from, you can't build electric cars. And even if you're GM, if you haven't made an arrangement for those batteries and you didn't get financially involved in producing those batteries, you're going to have to pay a premium for them, and you're not going to be able to make a profit on the car because the batteries are going to cost you too much. So these cars that I have on the list here are people that they're all in, and they have provided and set up for their battery source. The Gigafactory, Tesla's Gigafactory in Sparks, Arizona, makes as many batteries as the rest of the world combined. And we're going to need about another 30 of those, and about 8 of them are already in process by other car manufacturers. Specifically, VW has just dedicated $23 billion for battery development and manufacture for their cars. And Porsche is part of them. So this is a Porsche Taycan. And this picture was taken in the wild. This is a car that they're testing right now. This is an Opel. This is an Audi. This is a BMW.
That's the type of electric cars I'm talking about.
That's an i8. That's an i8, and the next iteration of the i8 will be all electric. This car is currently half electric.
Volvo's going all electric, aren't they?
Huh?
Isn't Volvo going all electric?
Volvo says that they will be going all electric.
When is Acura going to jump in on it?
This is a pickup truck called Workhorse. This is a Mercedes-Benz. This is an Audi in testing. So these cars are coming because this is going through testing right now. Volvo has set up for their battery supply. This is Volkswagen. This is their ID3. That's the model of that car. And they got 10,000 pre-orders in 24 hours. Everybody put down $1,000. This is a Nissan, and they're investing also in a startup company in China. So they're looking to do that to help get their prices down. I'm not sure about what their battery capability is, nor am I sure of what the Honda battery capability is.
Question. Are we going to see a conversion to all electric vehicles in our lifetime? Is it?
No.
Pretty much. Depends how long you plan on living.
Long time?
This is a picture in the wild of the Tesla Model Y, which they have not shown any pictures of yet. And Honda and GM are working together to do a blockchain project for smart grids. What are smart grids? Smart grids are when you plug in your car and you have range left on your car and you just got home and the electric company needs electricity, they can borrow it from your car and then charge it back later because you tell them when you want a full charge, and you have a smart system at your house that makes sure that you have a full charge when you're ready to go. In the meantime, it lends that capacity to the grid so that you don't have to have, so that the electric cars become actually part of the grid. So they're not just part of the problem, they're part of the solution. This is a Niro, and a Kia Niro, and some people are thinking that this is going to be the standard of the electric cars worldwide. And VW, like I said, they have a $23 billion battery project. This is another Mercedes. It's another view of the same car. This is Polestar. They're associated with Volvo. This is Kia in Hyundai, and this is one of the Rimac brothers. And they have that Rimac $250,000 supercar. Well, they've made an arrangement with him to work on their sports cars. And GM, they're going to build an electric pickup truck. Ford's going to build an electric pickup truck. Here's a Taycan interior. Now, I have to say that there are other things, like it's not just cars. This is a camper conversion for a truck. This is an autonomous delivery truck. This is what we find is that Anaheim, California, has just bought 40 BYD electric buses. Mac is building this is an electric garbage truck. Vietnam has just got, this is not the United States, this is not a first world country. Vietnam has just got 3,000 electric buses. You have to understand, in China, all the buses are electric. And here's a Ford electric. And here's a Freightliner electric. And here's some electric buses in Latin America. And they say they're going to be all electric by 2040, which clearly would be your lifetime.
Are these all central, I don't know central, but air conditioned for comfort? I mean, I guess.
I don't know of any modern vehicle that isn't.
You got jackets on, Julie.
Because you
so
have
they
a
were
lot of
probably
power, you need a bigger battery to run a bus or a big truck.
They were wearing jackets, Julie. Did you see the picture?
So,
So what?
They had coats on, so they were probably cold inside the bus.
Oh dear.
so there are others, like this is a Chinese manufacturer, and this is a car they're planning on delivering to the United States, and the sale price is looked to be $20,000. How do you like this little VW concept camping van? And yeah, it's kind of like the VW bus thing. You know Dyson, the vacuum cleaner people? This comes off of their patent application for the third row seating and how he's going to do it. So Dyson has a couple, I forget what the number is, but it's a couple $1 billion in batteries themselves with the intention of building electric cars. They're planning on getting into business. Here's Byton. Here's Mullen. And Volkswagen is going to do a Chinese venture to bring the price of the cars down also. So that's the end of the presentation, or maybe it's just the beginning.
When will they have vehicles that can pull trailers?
Do you have a question there?
Pardon?
No, I thought Jim was talking.
When will they have a vehicle that's capable of pulling a trailer?
The Model Y.
One that I can afford.
Well, you have to tell me your finances, but I will tell you that
About 30,000.
I'm pulling a trailer with my Chevy Volt.
Yeah, but we got a big enough trailer that it would make your Chevy Volt go all over the place.
I don't doubt that because I'm pulling the lightest trailer I could get.
Sure.
The
It would have to be a heavy enough vehicle.
The Model X has a 5,000 pound towing capacity. It's rated for that, but they have pulled the boring machine through the tunnels. And there's a picture of a Model X actually pulling a full loaded semi out of the snow.
Putting this in perspective, back in 1900, there were lots of horses on the road, a few infernal combustion vehicles driving around. And if the cars hadn't taken over, there would be, they were heading toward 6 inches of horse exhaust on the street.
That's what the street department was originally for. And they had street sweeps. This was young boys that would go out, and the women with their long dresses would stand on the sidewalk, and the little boy would come up, and then he would sweep a path through the horse exhaust so she could cross the street without soiling her finery. And then he would be paid. And so every night, they would clean up the streets because the streets were a disaster during the day. And what happened, it wasn't just the streets, it was the horses. And the street department had to clean up like 200 dead horses a day. And they didn't clean them up when they died because they were too hard to load into trucks. They would let them, because they had rigor mortis and they couldn't get them in the trucks. So they would wait till they went soft again, which was just after a week, and then they would load them in the trucks.
Norm, I'm assuming that none of them have an alternator that would charge the battery while they're driving. That's correct?
The Chevy Volt has that, and nobody else does that. And it's the price of the batteries. And as the price of the batteries come down, that will no longer be a necessity or a requirement or something that is attractive.
I'm curious, as the driver of the premier plug-in hybrid vehicle in the world, why you don't emphasize or discuss that more in your presentation of the topic?
Which?
The Volt.
The Volt,
driver.
the Volt is a transition machine. It is a transition machine because the price of batteries were too much when they built it, and you just have enough batteries to handle most of your trips, and the rest of it you run on gas.
But you don't need the charging infrastructure. You don't need any of that. You're completely flexible. Drive coast to coast.
Well, actually, when we went out west, I had range anxiety. You tell my wife, because we couldn't find a gas station. Because we went to places when we got there, only God was there. And he hasn't opened stations yet, as far as I know, at least none of the places where I was. And we got on our GPS unit. And I said, honey, we might as well get gas here because we're going where there isn't going to be any gas. So I went my GPS unit and says, where's the closest gas station? It says 25 miles. I says, I'll take it. So I says, take me there. And he says, oh, by the way, that was as a crow flies. If you would like to go there on what passes for roads in this part of the country, it's 125 miles. I had 95 miles of range at that time. So I said, uh-oh. So I says, I'll take the next one, 30 miles. He says, no, that one's 140. He says, give me the next one. And I says, oh, shit. And I just stopped the car right in the middle of the road. Because they don't use it anyhow. I mean, what the hell difference does it make if I stop there? That's why there's no gas stations. Nobody drives on the road. So finally, a guy who had just got his elk drove by, and we got talking to him. And I found out a couple things. One thing I found out is that not every place that says they have, see, we're stupid. We think the GPS unit tells us where there's gas. But if you read the label, it says fuel. And I pulled up at this station, and it was diesel only, and it was a co-op, and there was no attendant, and you had to have their credit card. So that wasn't very useful to me. I also found out that my GPS unit thinks that every 7-Eleven has gas. And I bet you know that's not true. But also, there are places that have gas that my GPS unit doesn't tell me about.
Grocery stores, for example.
Well, they have to be open 24 hours. So little towns where they pull in the street at 5 o'clock, they have gas stations, most of them, but they're not on a GPS unit. But I recommend you get there by 4:30 because they close early.
We have time for one more question. Trying to get you guys out of here. It's a little after 9.
So I have to say that when I pulled over on the side of the road and stopped, my wife knew exactly what was going on. And she just bit her tongue and says, this is a problem. I trust Norman to fix it, and I'm not going to make it any worse. And honey, I thank you for that. That was a real blessing to me at that time.
Thank you, Norm. Very entertaining.
Very good.